When Etta found me again, I was on the rooftop terrace of my own luxury villa, sipping rose tea while Helen, my wife, gently brushed the hair of our sleepy daughter resting on her lap. The wind was soft. My life was quiet. I never imagined that the woman who once looked down on my love, who once said I wasn't worthy of her, would one day stand in the rain outside my gate, soaked to the bone, begging for a chance to start over. But I simply looked at her and said, "When I loved you, I would have let the world walk all over me just to see you smile. But now, you're not even worth a drop of the tea in my hand." She had nothing to say, because deep down she knew. I had once waited for her outside her office for 6 straight hours just to hand her the earrings she casually mentioned liking. She hadn't even looked me in the eyes back then. She had stepped into a sports car with Robertson, tossed me a glance, and said, "Arthur, someone like you will never understand what I deserve." And maybe I didn't, back then. But now, she understood what she had thrown away. She saw it clearly, because the Arthur she mocked was gone, and the man she was looking at now was everything she said she wanted but never thought I'd become: wealthy, respected, and untouchable. Helen turned to me, her voice soft. "Arthur, she's still there." I didn't look. I didn't need to. Let her watch. Let her see what it looks like when the man she dismissed chooses someone else, someone who never needed to be begged to stay. Because Etta once told me I was only a stepping stone on her way up. But today, she was the one kneeling, hoping I'd reach out and lift her back into a life she no longer had any place in. Too late. Much too late. Back then, I wasn't the Arthur people know now. I was just a young man working 2 jobs and studying, at night, trying to build something real. I wasn't born into wealth, but I had something that most people didn't: patience and grit. And I loved Etta with the kind of intensity that only a fool can give, the kind that doesn't expect anything. In return, we met in university. She was dazzling, always surrounded by people, always the center of every conversation. I was the guy with secondhand shoes and ink-stained fingers, always quietly observing from a distance. But fate gave me a moment. During an orientation event, she tripped coming down the steps, and I caught her before she hit the ground. That's when she looked at me properly for the first time. That was all it took for me to fall, and from then on, I gave her everything. It started with small things: coffee, on rainy mornings, a handwritten poem tucked into her locker, running across campus to deliver her forgotten notes. She never asked. I just did it. She used to smile then, used to call me sweet, used to lean her head against my shoulder and sigh like I was her safe place. But the more I gave, the less I became. She graduated and got hired into a big firm, while I was still grinding, still laying the foundation for my own company. And at first, she said she believed in me. She'd kiss my forehead and whisper, "One day you'll be great." But somewhere along the way, her tone changed. I was no longer the man of her future. I was a man she was tolerating in the present. Then came Robertson. He was her colleague. Wealthy background, drove imported cars, wore custom suits, had connections in all the places I couldn't touch yet. I could tell the moment she met him, her laughter shifted. Her eyes drifted when we were together. She started canceling dinner plans, coming home late, claiming work was too demanding. One night, I waited outside her office with a small box in my pocket. I had saved for 3 months to buy her the necklace she once paused to admire at a store window. When she walked out, she didn't see me at first. She was with Robertson, laughing at something he said. Then she spotted me. Her smile vanished instantly. "Arthur," she said, clearly annoyed. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to surprise you," I said, holding out the box. She didn't even take it. "Arthur, this is embarrassing." That moment felt like being slapped in front of the world. Robertson didn't say a word, just put his arm around her shoulder and gave me a look. Not pity, not hostility, just dismissal, like I was some street vendor, trying to force my way into their world. A week later, she told me she wanted space. "I need time to figure out what I want," she said. What she meant was, "You're not enough." I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I just left. And while she went off chasing comfort and status, I buried myself in work. Every insult, every time she ignored my calls, every time I saw a picture of her smiling with him online, it all became fuel. I slept 3 hours a night, burned through failures, and clawed my way up. In 2 years, I launched my first successful product. In 3, I bought the company she once interned at. By the 4th year, I was being called one of the top emerging businessmen in the city. But none of that mattered as much as what happened when I met Helen. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't the type to walk into a room and command attention. But she had the kind of presence that made everything feel calm. I met her at a charity event. I was a last-minute guest, and she was serving tea to raise funds. She spilled some on my sleeve and apologized profusely. I just laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in months. We talked for hours that night. Helen didn't know my net worth. She didn't care. She cared about whether I was sleeping well, what books I liked, how I took my coffee. She never asked me to prove anything. With her, I wasn't building a future. I was already living it. We married a year later. Quiet. Ceremony? Just close friends. No drama. And now we had a daughter who looked at me like I was the son. Every time I held her in my arms, I forgot the pain of ever being unwanted. But people from the past have a way of returning when you least expect them. Last week, I stepped out of my car after a late meeting and found Etta waiting at the gates of my home. She looked nothing like the proud woman who once turned her back on me. She was thinner, paler. Her eyes searched mine like she was trying to find the boy she once loved. But I wasn't that boy anymore. "I heard you moved back here," she said, voice trembling. "I never left," I replied. "You just stopped looking." She opened her mouth to say something else, but Helen called from the balcony. "Arthur, do you want me to warm your tea again?" That's when Etta saw her, and that's when she realized she wasn't the one I waited for anymore. It started 3 months before our wedding. Etta and I were still technically together, though we were spending more time apart than with each other. I didn't question it much then. I thought she was just stressed. I told myself people go through phases. I believed she'd come around once things settled. That was the problem. I kept believing. The night it happened, I had just closed a major deal. It was the kind of breakthrough I used to dream about. I went straight to her apartment with a bouquet and a bottle of her favorite wine. I still remember how light my steps felt walking up the stairs, but when I got to her door, it was slightly open. At first, I thought she'd forgotten to lock it. I stepped inside quietly, ready to surprise her. Then I heard it. Laughter. Hers and his. I walked down the hall slowly, each step heavier than the last. I stopped at her living room door, and there they were. Etta, barefoot in one of Robertson's shirts, and him sitting comfortably on the couch holding a glass of her wine. They weren't touching, but they didn't need to. The intimacy was obvious. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there, watching. Etta turned her head, her laughter trailing off when she saw me. Her smile collapsed. She stood up too quickly, knocking over the wine glass. It shattered, red spreading across the rug like a wound. "Arthur, wait, it's not what it looks like," she said, rushing over. Robertson just leaned back, unconcerned. He looked at me like I was interrupting something he'd already claimed. "I came to celebrate with you," I said. "I got the deal. We could have started planning the wedding." Etta shook her head. "It's not like that. I was going to tell you, what, that you've been spending nights with him? That you're wearing his clothes now?" "I wasn't with him like that," she shouted, as if volume could erase the scene. "We were just talking. I needed someone to talk to. You've been so distant lately, always working. So you crawled into his arms because I was working for our future?" "You don't understand." Her voice cracked. "You've changed, Arthur. You don't look at me the way you used to. You used to listen. You used to be there. Lately, it's like I'm not enough for you anymore." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "You said I changed?" I asked. "Do you know why I changed? Because every time I looked at you, you looked like you regretted being with me. Every compliment felt like a duty. Every smile felt rehearsed." She turned away, eyes wet. I didn't mean to fall for him. It just happened. Robertson stood up finally, brushing invisible dust off his sleeve. Look, Arthur, I don't want to come between you two. Etta and I, our history goes back. But if you truly care about her, you'll forgive her. Everyone makes mistakes. I looked at him, then her. I gave you everything, I said. And you gave me betrayal wrapped in excuses. She reached for my hand. I was scared. You were moving so fast, and I felt like I was getting left behind. He was just a moment. You are my future. But it was too late. A moment is all it takes to break something forever. I walked out that night without saying another word. She called the next day, dozens of times, sent long messages, voice notes. I didn't respond to any of them. What was left to say? Weeks later, she showed up at my office. She was wearing a pale beige dress, the one I once said made her look like sunrise. She stood outside the glass doors like a lost memory, and for a moment I almost told security to let her in. But Helen arrived that very second, holding a lunchbox she made for me. She kissed my cheek in front of everyone, smiled, and said, "You're working too hard. You promised me you'd take breaks." That moment made the decision for me. I watched Etta watch us. Her smile faded. Her fingers trembled on the strap of her purse. And I knew. She finally understood what she'd lost. Not a man with wealth, but a man who would have stood by her through fire if only she'd chosen not to light it herself. Still, she didn't give up. She reached out to my parents. My father, still stuck in the past, called me that night and said, "Arthur, don't be so hard on the girl. She made a mistake. People make mistakes." "No," I said quietly. "A mistake is spilling coffee on a shirt. She made a choice." He sighed. "You're cold, not cold, just finally awake." My mother didn't say anything at first, but later that week she sent me a message. "If you think Helen is better than Etta, you're a fool. Etta is a real woman. She challenged you. Helen just obeys." I didn't reply, because for the first time in my life, I didn't care what anyone else thought. The only person I owed anything to was myself. The days that followed were quiet on the outside, but inside me, everything was burning. I thought cutting her off would bring peace. I expected silence to be a relief, but every time my phone buzzed, a piece of me clenched, expecting her name, hoping it wouldn't be there, then hating myself for checking. At night, I would lie awake beside Helen. She slept with her hand gently resting on my chest, steady and trusting. And yet I stared at the ceiling, the past playing over and over in my mind like a song I didn't know how to shut off. I hated that I still felt something. I hated that betrayal doesn't just switch off love like a button. I hated that the same. Woman who once said I was her entire sky had let another man take my place like it meant nothing. And worst of all, I hated that she still had the power to haunt me in my quietest hours. The business world kept moving, but I wasn't fully there. I signed contracts, attended meetings, answered questions, but part of me was always somewhere else, stuck in a memory I didn't want but couldn't shake. One night, I sat in my car, after a long meeting, unable to go inside. I stared at the windshield, rain tapping gently against the glass, and thought about how I used to wait in the rain for her. Back then, I was happy to get drenched just to hand her a warm drink. She never asked me to, but I always hoped it would mean something. That she'd see me, really see me, and choose me fully. But she never did. That was the truth I kept avoiding. I was always an option to her, something to keep around when things were uncertain, a backup plan disguised as love. Helen was different. She never asked for anything except honesty. She never guilted me for being busy, never tried to change me, never made me feel small. With her, love felt like breathing, quiet and constant. And yet there were moments I pulled away from her emotionally, not because of her, but because of the damage Etta left behind. I caught myself comparing, doubting, overthinking. I hated that Etta's shadow still stretched into my new life. One morning I found Helen in the kitchen, humming softly as she packed our daughter's lunchbox. She turned, smiled, and said, "You've been somewhere else lately." I froze. She didn't sound angry, just sad. I nodded. "I'm trying." "I know," she said. "Just don't let the past poison what we're building." That sentence stuck with me all day. Because that's exactly what was happening. I was letting a woman who walked away from me ruin what I had finally found. Something gentle, something real. But then came the text that unraveled everything again. It was from Etta. "I miss you. Just talk to me once. Please." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. But the silence didn't stop her. The next day, she showed up again. This time at my office parking lot, drenched in rain, no umbrella, her hair clinging to her face, her arms wrapped around herself like she was holding the last pieces of her pride. When I stepped out of the building, she called my name softly. I stopped, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to finish it properly. She stepped closer, eyes red, lip trembling. "Arthur, I can't live like this. I made a mistake. I know that now. Robertson was nothing. I was lost, and I thought he saw me. But I see everything clearly now. I see you." I didn't say anything. She took another step, rain dripping off her eyelashes. "You look happier now. But tell me honestly, do you never think about me?" I looked her in the eyes, steady and unshaken. "Of course I do, but not with longing." With relief, her breath hitched. "I think about the man I was when I loved you, the things I endured, the way I twisted myself into a shape I thought you'd want, and I thank God every day that I'm not him anymore." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't move. She tried again, voice cracking. "Arthur, I still love you. Don't you see that?" "No," I said quietly. "You don't. You love the idea of what I've become, not who I was when I gave you everything." She collapsed into herself, shaking. "I know I ruined everything, but I still believe we were meant to be." I stepped back. "Then maybe fate is cruel, but I'm not. So for the sake of what we once had, I'm asking you, don't come here again." And then I walked away. That night, Helen wrapped her arms around me in bed and whispered, "Did you see her again?" I nodded. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I am now," I whispered back. "Because I finally know I was never the problem." I kissed her forehead, and for the first time in weeks, slept like the past had finally let me go. It was 2 weeks after, that rainy confrontation when the second blow landed, quietly, unexpectedly, and so calculated it chilled me. That morning, Helen and I had just finished breakfast. Our daughter was playing with her crayons near the window, sunlight painting, her hair in soft gold. Everything felt calm, peaceful in a way I had worked so hard to protect. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I ignored it at first, then it rang again, and again, until I finally picked up, more annoyed than curious. "Arthur Wang?" a man's voice asked. "Yes. I'm calling from the HR department at your S branch office. There's a situation here. We thought you should know first." My stomach tightened. What kind of situation? He hesitated. Etta Liu applied for a position through someone's referral. Her resume passed initial screening, but she walked into the office this morning claiming she's your fiancé and insisted on being shown around personally. She's making things very uncomfortable. I stood still, unable to respond. For a moment, she said, "What?" "She told our staff she's your soon-to-be wife, that you two had a private engagement and your current situation with another woman was temporary. She said you'd explain once you got here." My fingers curled slowly around the edge of the dining table. "Tell her to leave the building, immediately, and file her under banned entries. If she tries again, call security." "Yes, sir," the man said quickly. "We'll handle it." I hung up. Helen was watching me, quiet but alert. What happened? I didn't lie. I told her everything. She didn't cry, She didn't panic. She just placed her hand on my wrist and said, "I trust you, but I won't let someone drag me into a triangle I never asked for." Her strength was quiet, but firm. She didn't deserve this. No one did. I had already made it clear to Etta that we were done. But now she was creating narratives, inserting herself into my professional life, trying to dismantle the one thing I still held sacred: my work, my credibility, my peace. That afternoon, I received another message. From Robertson. "Arthur, I suggest you stop playing the victim. You're not as clean as you pretend to be." Attached was a photo, blurry, clearly taken from a distance, of me and Helen from a charity event weeks ago. Helen's hand was on my chest. I was smiling. And in the background, Etta stood alone, watching. So that's what they were doing now, trying to spin a story, trying to make it look like I cheated, like I had been the liar all along. The next few hours moved fast. A few gossip blogs picked it up. Headlines read, "Power couple in trouble? Arthur Wang accused of emotional infidelity. Ex-fiancé claims she was cast aside for PR marriage." I sat in my office, watching the flames they tried to light, but I didn't panic, because what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this the moment Etta showed up at my gates that night. I had footage, recordings, timestamps. I had kept every message she sent, every apology, every twisted plea that contradicted the lies they now spun. They thought they could play the victim in public? Fine. They'd learn that I wasn't the boy they used to know anymore, and I wasn't afraid to burn everything down if it meant keeping what mattered safe. The boardroom was dead silent when I walked in. All eyes turned to me, some expectant, some cautious, others already casting judgment. On one side of the long mahogany table sat 3 board members, stone-faced. On the other, Etta and Robertson. Etta was in a pale blue dress that reminded me of the one she wore on the day we first kissed, hair curled just the way she used to wear it when she wanted something. She looked composed on the surface, but I could see the tension in her fingers, nails digging into her own palms. Robertson, ever smug, was lounging in his chair like he owned the place. He didn't greet me. He just nodded, like we were equals in this war he was trying to start. I took my seat at the head, calm, expressionless. The chairman cleared his throat. "Arthur, this emergency meeting was called because we've received formal complaints about internal misconduct. Allegations are being made that your relationship with your wife, Helen, began while you were still engaged to Miss Etta Liu." Didn't react. I expected that. Robertson added, "This isn't personal, Arthur. It's about company ethics. Investors don't like instability, especially when it involves executives in romantic scandals. We simply want clarity before this spirals into a full-blown PR disaster." Etta looked at me, tears shining in her eyes. "Arthur, I didn't want it to come to this. But you forced my hand. You made me look like a joke. You married someone else weeks after I thought we were planning a life together. I still love you, but I can't just be thrown away like I meant nothing." I leaned forward slightly. "You came here hoping I'd beg you to stop this, but I won't. You say I discarded you? Let's walk through the timeline together, shall we?" Her lips trembled. I pressed a button on the tablet in front of me and turned the screen around so everyone could see. First, a video, security footage, from the night I caught her with Robertson, her in his shirt, his arm around her, her startled expression when she noticed me. The boardroom was silent. Then, screenshots, dozens of messages from Etta to me after that night. Apologies. Please. I messed up. It didn't mean anything. Please don't walk away. Next, voice recordings. One of them had her whispering into the phone. "I know I was wrong. I'll cut off Robertson. Just come back. I can't lose you." Robertson sat up straighter, eyes narrowing. And finally, an email thread between Etta and one of our HR heads, where she falsely claimed to be my fiancé and tried to pull strings to get hired under a fake internal recommendation. I turned off, the screen and looked directly at the chairman. These are the people claiming I lack ethics. Eda's face drained of color. I said nothing when they spread rumors online. I stayed silent when they planted stories on gossip blogs. I didn't retaliate when they showed up at my house, at my company, at my life, but that silence was mistaken for guilt, for weakness. I stood up, letting my voice steady but cold. From today onward, anyone who chooses to believe their lies over documented truth can consider themselves enemies of my company, and that includes anyone sitting at this table. The chairman shifted uncomfortably. Eda finally found her voice. Arthur, I only did all this because I still love you. I was desperate. I thought if I made you jealous, if I reminded you of what we had, you'd come back. I stared at her. You don't understand what love is. You've never loved anyone but yourself. Her voice rose. You think Helen is better than me? That she wouldn't betray you if she was tempted? Don't. Be naive! She's playing the quiet, perfect wife now, but someday she'll grow bored of your seriousness, your silence. You can insult me, I interrupted. You can lie about me, but don't you dare speak about Helen, Robertson scoffed. Protecting your wife won't make your company immune to the fallout. This story's already out there. People believe what they read first. That's how media works. I turned to him. Yes, and they also believe what they see. With a nod to my assistant, the projector screen behind me came to life. Dozens of news clips, short videos, comments flooding in from people who had already seen the evidence we'd just shown, because I'd quietly leaked it myself an hour before the meeting began. The public was turning. Sympathy for Eda and Robertson was evaporating. They weren't victims anymore. They were manipulators, opportunists. And worst of all, liars. Gasps broke out around the room. Eda sank into her seat, shaking. You planned this? I planned nothing, I said. I just prepared for when you'd overplay your hand. Robertson stood up abruptly. You think this is over? You think the world just forgives because you edited a few clips and put on a show? I looked at him emotionless. I don't need forgiveness, I just need the truth to be louder than your lies. The security guards at the door stepped forward. Escort Mr. Robertson out. His shares are being frozen pending investigation for internal sabotage and defamation. And her? One of them asked, nodding toward Eda. I didn't even flinch. She's already gone. They moved forward. Robertson shouted protests. Eda whispered my name once. Arthur. I didn't look back. After the door slammed shut, the silence was different. No tension, just quiet clarity. The chairman cleared his throat. We apologize for the way this was handled. You've made your case. I nodded. Good. Then let's get back to work. Later that night, I returned home. Helen was in the garden playing with our daughter, both laughing under the golden sky. I watched for a long time before she noticed me. She stood and walked toward me, her expression unreadable. Is it over? Yes, I said. It's over. She touched my chest lightly, eyes searching mine. You sure? I nodded. She leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder. You didn't deserve what they tried to do, she said. No, I whispered. But I deserved to find someone who'd fight beside me, not against me. And in that moment, as our daughter came running to wrap her arms around my leg and the sun dipped low behind the trees, I realized Eda had been the lesson. But Helen was the reward. 3 months passed. The online noise died down. The articles vanished. The hashtags faded. People moved on like they always do. But the scars they left behind remained, etched in memory. My name was cleared. Yes, but some reputations, once scratched, can never be fully polished again. Except I didn't care. Because now I understood something deeper. Public perception is borrowed. But peace is owned. And mine was bought with silence, patience, and strategy. Eda never showed her face again in the city's inner circles. After the evidence of her manipulation, the lies she spun to gain access to my company, and her false HR claims were made public, no respectable firm would touch her. Her name was quietly blacklisted across every executive chain. The people who once praised her charm now avoided her like the plague. One former acquaintance told me in passing that she'd moved to a small apartment in the outskirts of the city, living alone, barely stepping out during the day. As for Robertson, his fall was less quiet. After I had his shares frozen, an investigation revealed more than I expected. He'd been siphoning small percentages of company funds through shell suppliers for nearly a year and falsifying consulting invoices to cover his tracks. It was subtle, clever even, but not clever enough. He was arrested 3 weeks after the boardroom incident. The moment the police cuffed him in front of cameras, his head down, expression pale, it felt like a page being closed. Not turned, closed. But revenge wasn't about shouting victory. It was in the quiet erasure of people who thought they could rewrite your worth. I never went to see Etta, never spoke to her again. But I did hear one final thing. A reporter I once helped told me that Etta tried to sell her story to a media outlet. One last attempt to twist the narrative. She claimed she was used, that I had manipulated her from the start, that I had emotionally broken her. But the outlet refused to publish it. The editor had replied with one line, "We've seen the footage. The real victim already moved on." And I had, because Helen never once asked me to prove anything, never once doubted me. Even in the storm, she stood behind me, not in front of me, not beneath me, behind me, as an equal, as a partner. One evening, we returned to the same tea house where it all began, where I'd first brought her after I bought the property. The sky was soft peach. Our daughter chased a butterfly across the lawn. Helen sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on mine. "Do you think they'll ever come back?" she asked, not out of fear, but curiosity. "They won't," I said. "They know better now." She was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "Good." We drank in silence for a while. Then she pulled out her phone, opened a video she had saved, and held it up to me. It was our daughter, just a day ago, telling her kindergarten class, "My daddy is strong. He makes bad people go away and makes mommy smile." I watched it twice. And suddenly, all the sleepless nights, the heartbreak, the betrayals, they all felt so far away. Like they belonged to a version of me that no longer existed. But before I could get too comfortable, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at my company. Handwritten. No sender's name. But I recognized the handwriting. Immediately, it was from Etta. The paper trembled slightly in my hands. Not because I was nervous, because it felt like a ghost was whispering again after I'd buried it. "Arthur, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't want pity. I know what I've lost. I see it every day. But I need to say this. You were right. I never knew what love was until I watched someone else receive it in the way you once gave it to me. I thought I was the star in your life, but I was only a passing shadow. I hope Helen holds on to you tighter than I ever did. And I hope you smile the way I once failed to make you. Because in the end, the worst punishment is knowing I'll never be you again." There was no return address. Just that letter. I didn't reply. There was no need to, because Etta's greatest punishment wasn't my anger, it was her own clarity. She had finally seen the truth, what she threw away, what she tried to reclaim, what she could never touch again. And unlike Robertson, she wouldn't be arrested or dragged across headlines. She would live freely, silently, but never peacefully. That was the ultimate revenge. Not destruction, exclusion. I folded the letter and locked it away, not as a keepsake, but as proof that every chapter, no matter how bitter, has an end. Weeks turned into months. Seasons changed. My company expanded into 3 new cities. Helen began a foundation for single mothers, and I quietly funded every cent. Our daughter grew taller, wiser. She began calling Helen her hero, and I agreed with her, because in this story, the one everyone thought was just the quiet woman in the background turned out to be the one who saved me. She never asked me to be more. She just reminded me I was already enough. And now, when people ask me what happened to Etta, I smile gently and say, she said she deserved better, and she was right. She just never realized I was the better.